Good morning, everyone. For Telesur, I'm Cody Weddle in Caracas, Venezuela. As we come on the air this morning, French police are conducting a major operation amid a two-day-old nationwide manhunt for suspects in the Charlie Hebdo massacre. Now, at least one hostage is being held by a suspect in the town of De Mataqual. The hostage situation emerged after two suspects in a high-profile shooting spree at the Paris offices of controversial satire magazine Charlie Hebdo were seen in the town. The community remains mostly on lockdown. Moving on, we turn to New York City. That's where Bolivian President Evo Morales officially handed over the position of chair of the group of 77 plus China. The post now goes to South Africa. Under the Bolivian leadership, the G77 issued comments opining on a number of international events. The group condemned the U.S. imposed sanctions against Venezuela, supported the Argentine legal battle against U.S.-based vulture funds, and denounced Israel's attacks on Gaza. Bolivia's time as chair of the group of developing nations was also characterized by progress on poverty reduction and climate change action. We go to Peru now. That's where former dictator Alberto Fujimori has received a new prison sentence. Fujimori imposed a reign of neoliberalism in the 1990s. Here's more from our correspondent Raul Mora.
Former dictator Alberto Fujimori was sentenced Thursday to 8 additional years in prison for illegally using public resources to buy off tabloid newspapers, paying them to write favorable headlines. Fujimori had most of the media serving his regime as a result of this and other secret deals with media corporations.
The court finds the defendant, Alberto Fujimori guilty. His general rights before the law are presented in the introduction to this sentence. As author of the crime of fraudulent embezzlement against the public administration of the state, and the court sentences him to 8 years in prison.
The court concluded that Fujimori spent between $2,000 to $3,000 per headline of each newspaper, totaling over $40 million. However, at the court hearing, Fujimori was defiant and received his sentence with smiles. His lawyer spoke on behalf of him.
We are facing a sentence that tomorrow could represent danger against any public administrator. In other words, the sentences establishes responsibilities that are not defined by laws or the Constitution.
This sentence means that Fujimori will remain in jail until April of 2021. However, he is already serving another term until February of 2032 for crimes against humanity after being convicted in 2009 of massacres totaling 25 civilian killings by a government death squad during Peru's internal war. Reporting from Lima, Peru for Telesur, Rael Mora.
Thanks to Raul. We go to Mexico now, where on January 2nd, journalist and activist Moses Sanchez was abducted by armed men from his home in the state of Veracruz. While the state suffers from high rates of drug gang crimes, including kidnappings, family and colleagues of Sanchez suspect that his abduction was no random act, but rather a case of enforced disappearance. Covering the latest, here's our correspondent Clayton Kahn.
Fellow journalist, students, and the family of the abducted journalist and activist Moises Sanchez continued their protest in his hometown of Medellín de Bravo. They say his reporting activism against local corruption made him an uncomfortable subject for the authorities.
We are yet to receive a threat or a phone call demanding ransom. Nothing. This is precisely because we know what his work is. We know that being a reporter is very dangerous in Veracruz. They may even disappear you, or you might have an accident.
Journalists and reporters also expressed their solidarity in the Mexican capital, protesting in front of the Veracruz State Representative Building. They say the case of Sanchez is not an isolated or a local matter.
A government that acts transparently does not need to target journalists. But when there are cases of corruption, siphoning of money, and repression, the government will turn to silence in the press.
Experts say that Mexico is one of the most dangerous countries for journalists to work, pointing to an approximately 90% impunity rate in cases of murdered media workers. According to media watchdog and rights groups, more than 50 journalists have been killed in the country since it launched its so-called drug war in 2006, and more than a third of those have been in the state of Veracruz. Clayton Kahn, Telesur, Mexico City.
Thanks to Clayton. We go to Syria now, where a group of extremists have destroyed a historic shrine. With more, here's our correspondent Nashwa Abdullah.
On Wednesday, terrorists affiliated to Jabhat al-Nusra terrorist organization destroyed the shrine of Al-Imam al-Nawawi in the city of Nawa in Daraa countryside. The terrorists dug up the shrine and detonated large amounts of explosive in it, which destroyed large segment of the monument. Iranian President Hassan Rouhani condemned the brutal practices perpetrated by the terrorist organizations against the people in Syria and Iraq. A military source said that army units killed all members of the terrorist group in Al-Mayadin in the countryside of Deir ez-Zor, northeastern province. Meanwhile, the Turkish Foreign Ministry said that Ankara and Washington are close to cutting a deal to start training moderate Syrian rebels. The United States and Turkey have failed to find a way to aid Syrian rebels because Turkey has demanded the creation of no zone of fly inside Syria, which Washington has rejected. Nashwan Abdullah, Telesur, Damascus, Syria.
Thanks to Nashwa. Meanwhile, in Sri Lanka, President Mahinda Rajapaksa has lost his bid for a third term in office. Rajapaksa had been in power for more than a decade, though his loss comes after months of dwindling public support for his government. Critics say his term is mired in corruption and authoritarianism. Rajapaksa lost the election to one of his own former political allies, Mithripala Sirisena. Sirisena has vowed to clean up the government and curb the power of the presidential office. And wrapping up today, millions of Catholics in Manila, the Philippines, have flocked to a traditional procession today for the feast day of the Black Statue of Jesus Christ. The statue is an icon carved in Mexico in the 17th century. Many Filipino Catholics believe the statue can grant miracles. The procession is expected to last 15 hours and attract as many as 10 million people by the end of the day. More on those stories and others at our website, telesurtv.net/English. For Telesur English, I'm Cody Weddle. Have a great Friday.